basically I'll be sitting there or I'll be doing something and it basically feels like this isn't real. Like you're not real. This isn't there. Whatever I'm doing, this isn't real. And people look at me, they're like, what do you mean it's not real? I'm like, it's not, it doesn't feel real. Like, are you going crazy or something? And I'm like, it certainly feels that way.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking to Ryan Seymour. Ryan is a retired NFL player currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. He went through quite an intense experience with depersonalization disorder, but has since, thankfully, fully recovered. And today I'm going to talk to Ryan about his experience with and recovery from DPDR. How are you doing, Ryan? It's great to be speaking to you today.
It's good to be speaking with you as well, Sean. It's a pleasure to be on the show this afternoon.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. Well, again, as Sean mentioned, my name is Ryan Seymour. I'm originally from Southeast Georgia. I currently live in Atlanta, Georgia. Grew up in a small town. Most of my early childhood was involved with playing sports, just like most young boys my age, and fortunate enough to be offered a full scholarship at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. And fortunately for me, when my senior year, after I graduated, I was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks, and so got a chance to live out in Washington for a while, and I ended up playing in the NFL for about 5 seasons or 5 years, which was just a great experience in itself. Got to meet a lot of really cool people from all over the country, all over the world, actually. So really enjoyed my time in the league, and got to play as much ball as I physically could. Unfortunately, with some injuries and some personal things, I had to walk away from the game on my own terms. But it was nice that I got to play football after college, and got to share those memories with my family now, and just get to look back and really enjoy that time. When I retired, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and was fortunate enough that I met a really pretty blonde girl, and we ended up dating for a few years and got married. And so so we started a family, and I have a newborn baby girl. She's 8 months old. She was born in January this year.
Congratulations, that's great.
But that's a little bit about me, and I'm looking forward to obviously sharing my experiences with DP and DR. For those out there who have gone through this, you're not alone. And obviously, Sean, as you preach in all your videos, it's 100% curable, I guess you could say. So I'm excited to share my experience and my story.
And can you tell us a little bit about your experience with depersonalization and how did it start for you?
I guess the first sign of DP was when I was in college. Playing college football, obviously you're surrounded by guys who, the terminology is work hard, play hard. So, I kind of fell into some of the social drinking and things like that when I was in college, which most people do, right? Obviously, a lot of people like to enjoy themselves and go out. Well, but I was drinking too much. And obviously with my drinking came hangovers and bad anxiety, especially when it was 4 or 5 day benders. And so that was the first time I'd actually experienced DP, was months on end struggling with alcohol, drinking too much, waking up, day after day with excruciating hangovers, which crippling anxiety. If anyone, obviously the Sunday scaries, kind of thing. So that was actually my first experience with DP. I actually was drinking so much that, and I'm sure people actually experience this with like drug uses and the marijuana and things like that, but I was actually drinking so much that when I was coming down from my, I guess, being intoxicated, that I was actually experiencing DP, and I was actually disassociating with things around me, and was actually struggling with, um, actual reality and things like that we kind of spoke about, Sean. So that was actually my first experience with DP. Now, when I stopped the drinking and when we'd have to kind of get more into the season, that was kind of more during the off seasons, but during the season, we, couldn't do that so much, and kind of laid off on the drinking, and eventually the symptoms kind of disappeared. But I didn't know what that was at the time. And it was a very scary thing at the time. And I thought to myself, wow, this is what, alcoholism feels like this is what, being drunk 24/7 will do to you. So I thought to myself, like, okay, if I quit the drinking, this will go away. And fortunately it did. Now at the time I didn't really realize that it was actually the anxiety and, some of that trauma that I was experiencing that was probably really relating to a lot of the DP and DR. So that was kind of my first experience. Now, also throughout my life, I've struggled with panic attacks, and again, so for those people who don't experience panic attacks, I don't know why we have them. I don't know why people who do have panic attacks have them, but they come out of nowhere and they can be triggered at any time, and it could just be sitting on the couch, kind of how Sean explained, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I've always I've always struggled with those for some reason. They'll come and go. There'll be months on end where I won't have one. And then there'll be 6 months where boom, I'll have a panic attack. And it's not like where I've ever been hospitalized or anything, but there certainly were, times where it's like, oh my God, I am dying. I feel like I am dying. My heart is beating out of my chest. I am hyperventilating. I have to get up and go to the next room and just try to completely trick my brain to think about something else to just get out of that state. Right. And actually, I've worked on some breathing exercises over the years to kind of help me get through some of those panic attacks. So I'm doing much better with that. But for someone, who struggles with panic attacks, DP and DR can be a symptom after the fact. And so, Sean, what kind of drove me to, I guess, start exploring more of what DP and DR was my most recent panic attack. So about 6 months ago, again, this is 2 months after my daughter was born. I was sitting in the living room, and I don't even know what I was doing. I think I was just watching TV, and all of a sudden, I started just thinking like, oh, I don't know why I'm feeling anxious. Okay, I'm feeling really anxious. Oh my goodness, I can't calm down. I cannot calm down. Oh my goodness, I'm having a panic attack. Heart started racing. Obviously, shortness of breath. Stood up, was scared out of my mind. I had to run upstairs to my wife and literally just like grab her and just like literally put my head on her chest and started just like breathing. She's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I just, I had a panic attack kind of thing. Well, that was a pretty bad one. It really scared me and it really worried me. And honestly, the next day when I woke up, my first thing when I woke up in the morning was, man, that was a bad panic attack yesterday. I hope I don't have another panic attack today. Throughout the rest of the day, man, I can't stop thinking about yesterday. That was awful. Day goes by, the next day, the following day, man, that was really bad. I just still am not coming down from that. I'm still shooken up over it. Well, here comes the fun part. That anxiety and that built up stress. Now I was starting to revisit some of that DP. I started disassociating from things. I started to basically get in my own head. I'd be downstairs in the basement. I'd be looking out the window, and all of a sudden my heart would sink because the things I was looking at, the trees, the grass, whatever it was outside, didn't seem real, and it would, and then of course the DP would actually happen, and it only happened for a few seconds. Most of my DP or DR has only ever lasted for maybe like 5 seconds at the max, but it is a feeling that you get that overwhelms you and your heart sinks. And I'm sure those who have experienced know exactly what I'm talking about in that exact moment that you feel DP, that, oh my gosh, it scares the life out of you, right? Because at that moment, nothing is real. At that moment, like you're not in this world, right? I don't know if it's in your own head, but for me personally, it was everything around me was just, I don't know, it just wasn't real. And so once that started, then came more stress, came more anxiety with, my God, that was a scary feeling. I hope I don't have that feeling again. And that turned into this kind of snowball, which I'm sure a lot of people experience, is once you experience DP, and again, not quite knowing what it is, one, you can worry about it, which is what I did. I worried about it. I worried more about having DP than I actually even had DP. And so that kind of took over my life, was just obsessing over this feeling of uncomfortable and disassociation and sort of things like that, that overcame my life, which then therefore triggered more DP, which kind of is that snowball effect that I kind of mentioned. Um, and this went on for months, right? It was just a monthly thing. And of course, the first thing I did, what Sean talks about in his manual, is 90% of the population, what are they going to do? They're going to self-diagnose, they're going to go on the internet. I read the exact forum that you did, that where the guy says, I've had DP for 30 years. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I had it, I had it 5 years ago and I had it 10 years ago. Here I am having it again. Maybe this time it's not going to go away. Maybe this time it is going to last for 30 years. And so I had all those thoughts. I had all those feelings that Sean kind of explains, in his manual about, you get the people on the message boards who have never done the research, who have never had the manual, talking about, I'm never going to get over this. And that was a big struggle for me. And that really was a worry of mine, Sean, that I may never recover from this, And of course, it's like, did a little bit of research and I found out, okay, it's due to stress and anxiety, right? So, all right, I'm trying to calm myself down. I'm still trying to just go about my day without letting DP ruin my life. Well, I, I was getting a little bit better, but still I would have relapses and then it'd be starting from square one. And so that was that really kind of like, that was that thought I was having of, oh my gosh, this is going to be with me forever. Because I kept, I'd have a little bit of progress. I'd go a few hours without maybe having DP or even thinking about it at all. And then I would say, wow, I didn't have DP today. Boom, there it is. Right. So, so,
Yeah.
so you all, again, those who have experienced know exactly probably what I'm talking about. But that's a little bit about my experience. Now, if you want me to kind of share how I got over it, and like obviously, I got on YouTube. And Sean, you have one of the few YouTube channels that actually I connected with, and I connected with yours the most, right? You had really broken down kind of step by step on what DP was, tips and tricks. And then finally, I was like, I'm going to look into this manual thing. So let me see what this is all about. So I actually went to click on the link below on the YouTube channel, bought the manual, downloaded the recordings, got them over to my phone. And so I was actually on vacation down in I was actually in Orlando, Florida when I bought the manual. And I was sitting there the whole trip, just kind of miserable again. We'd be out at the pool and I would just be, man, I'd be walking down the hallway. I'd be literally have this tunnel vision walking down the hallway and be like, bam, DP. This doesn't even seem real. I'm like walking down the hallway. It's terrible. So I'm sitting in the bed one night, actually on vacation, and I buy this manual. And it's probably 11:30 at night. And my wife is asleep next to me. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm reading this manual. she's like, go to bed. I'm like, no, this is good stuff right here. And so I started reading your story, and you kind of talk about, earlier that you experienced a bad panic attack out of nowhere. You kind of talk about how you had never had one and you thought you were dying and all these things. And I was like, that's exactly what happened to me, And then you were like, kind of talking about how, the first thing I did was go on the message boards. I did the same thing. And then it was like seeing the people talk about how this unrecoverable and I've had it for 30 years. Oh my God, I read that same manual. Literally, as I was reading the manual, I was like, this guy and I, like him and I are right on the same page, right? And so I started, obviously reading down the manual and just kind of understanding more about this condition can exist. It cannot exist without anxiety and worry and things like that. And so it just really started to hit home with me. It was like, I don't have to be afraid of this. They're only thoughts. This is being triggered by anxiety, by my panic attack, by me worrying about something. And literally, I almost got through the whole book that night. I didn't get through it all of it, but I got through about 65% of it. And after I closed that book, the next morning I woke up and I honestly felt like a completely different human being. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, man. It's like just kind of like wash over me that like I could finally let it go. I could just finally let it go and not have to worry about such a, such a silly thing. Obviously, looking back, it is a kind of a silly thing, but it's not, obviously, when you're going through it. It's very real. And that's something I wanted to talk about as well. I guess I kind of jumped over that, but for those who have a spouse or for those who have close family members, describing it to my wife was very difficult. I even during those 5 or 6 months that I was experiencing DP was going to see therapy. I was going to my kind of local therapist and was just kind of talking about, I'm experiencing this thing called depersonalization, derealization. And she goes, I've never heard of that before. And I'm like, you've never heard of that before? Aren't you supposed to be a licensed therapist? Like, isn't this like common knowledge? And it was very shocking to me that so many people actually didn't know what depersonalization and derealization was. And that, during that struggle, when I was really in the heart of, my episodes, was, oh my gosh, if the therapist doesn't even know what this is, how the heck am I going to get over this? Right. And so it could be very difficult explaining the symptoms, disconnecting, feeling like reality it's not real, and I don't know how to explain it other than the way I'm describing it to like people is like, basically I'll be sitting there or I'll be doing something and it basically feels like this isn't real. Like, you're not real. This isn't there. Whatever I'm doing, this isn't real. And people look at me, they're like, what do you mean it's not real? I'm like, it's not, it doesn't feel real. They're like, are you going crazy or something? And I'm like, it certainly feels that way. You know? So, but for those who have loved ones and those who have to struggle with this on a day-to-day going to work, or it's a really hard thing, and obviously it affects a lot of people in different ways, and it affects those around you. But I was very blessed that I have, at least my wife was there to like listen to me and kind of hear me out and try to be supportive in any way she could, even though unfortunately the ones around you and the ones you love, they may not know how to help you. And that was a real struggle. So, I hope that kind of lays out a little bit about my experience and just kind of what I dealt with and how I overcame it. But to
Yeah.
be honest, just understanding the conditioning, understanding why you're having these feelings, that knowledge is power, and just understanding what the illness is really will help everyone kind of get over it. Because then you'll start to think to yourself, like, I'm only having these thoughts and these feelings because I'm anxious. If it's not there, if the anxiety is not there, this condition cannot exist. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely, Ryan. And there's a phrase that says anxiety is caused by the fear of anxiety. And that same way, panic attacks are caused by the fear of panic attacks, and depersonalization is caused by the fear of depersonalization. Like, so much of this and all anxiety-based conditions comes from the a lack of understanding of what's actually happening when you go through them. First, you experience these symptoms and you catastrophize that they must mean something terrible, like you're going crazy or you're going to die. When in fact, what you're experiencing is like your body and brain's natural and correct response to stress and anxiety. It's that core understanding of what it is that takes the fear out of it, because that is the lack of understanding around it, and putting different kind of narratives on it gives it a strength that it doesn't deserve, and gives it a sense of scale that it doesn't deserve. And when you actually just take all that narrative scaffolding off it and you look at it and say, okay, that's why this happened. That's why all these different symptoms happened. That's why I was having these types of thoughts. This is why I had this feeling of disconnection. And you kind of tick them off one by one. You say, okay, that was scary when I went through it, but all of these actually make complete sense. You stop being afraid of it, because you understand that so much of the reason it happened in the first place, or turned into an ongoing issue in the first place,
exactly.
was because
Yes.
you didn't understand what was happening. And
Right.
yeah. It's interesting what you say as well about the alcohol, Ryan, because it's something that I encountered as well. So my experience with DPDR was back when I was 25 years old when I got it first. So young man, socializing, love going out, love beating people and all the rest of it. But while I was recovering, I found that hangovers the next day always made things worse.
Way worse.
And what I thought was, well, it's the alcohol that is causing this to happen, you know. But what I later realized after I recovered was looking back on it and saying, it's not specifically the alcohol that's causing it. It's the anxiety that happens with a hangover that triggers these feelings of anxiety, like the heart palpitations, racing thoughts, feelings of depersonalization, derealization. Now, when these happen outside of the context of like an ongoing feelings of DP and DR, and as they happen for you initially, Ryan, you might feel them for a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes, but you don't really focus on them. And also, I think because you can kind of ascribe them to the hangover, or you can just get back to watching the Netflix or whatever it is you're doing,
Right.
You can kind of take the spotlight away from that and focus onto something else, thereby allowing the DP and the DR to fade away naturally, which is what happens for the vast majority of people who experience it, and it doesn't turn into an ongoing issue. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make a good point to just kind of one of the things that you said, or maybe it was one of the videos, or maybe it was in the manual, where the moment that you are not thinking about depersonalization, or the moment where you're not having any thoughts at all about anxiety, you are 100% cured. That was a big quote that stuck with me for a long time, was that the moments that I'm not thinking about DP or DR, the moments that I'm not having anxiety, and when you said you're 100% cured, I was like, oh my gosh, that is such a true statement, because in that moment, I wasn't having any thoughts of DP or DR, or any thoughts of anxiety. I was just doing the things I like to do, right? And so I was thinking to myself, wow, the DP and DR are, like you mentioned, I can track them to why they were being like, why I was having those symptoms. I can track them to the panic attack. I can trace them to the anxiety. So a few minutes ago, when you were kind of talking like, hey, I can pinpoint the hangover and the drinking was causing XYZ, was causing the racing thoughts, the DP, the anxiety. Those type of statements, people need to realize, like, you are not suffering from something, like you're not sick. You don't have a disease. You're not like, where like, hey, you have cancer or something's wrong with you. It's, you're experiencing these symptoms because of XYZ, right? Because you might be, drinking or smoking or having a panic attack. And so when I was able to pinpoint why I was actually having this, having these symptoms, that was also like a really, that was also a really good thing to know during my recovery, was like, wow, I didn't think about DP or DR for the last hour. I'm completely healed. And let's think to myself, the only reason why I'm having DP or DR is when I was anxious or when I had a panic attack. And before I had my panic attack, I was totally normal. So there's actually nothing wrong with me. It's just that I had something happen to me. I had a panic attack, or I went through an experience that caused these thoughts to come on. And so that really hit home with me, Sean. Just exactly what you were talking about, was you can pinpoint when you're having the anxiety, when you're having the racing thoughts, when you're having the DP, to specific circumstances. And when you think about it that way, you kind of rationalize yourself like, wow, there's nothing wrong with me, you know? So that was another big part of my recovery. I like that line where you said, when you don't have any thoughts of DP, you're 100% healed. And when you said, you can track, like before I had the panic attack, I went years without having DP. Now, like I said, I had it back when I was younger, when I was in college, when I was like 20, 21. But it's just interesting when you think about that, for people who have DP now. Think about before you ever had DP or DR, what triggered that DP? Like, why are you having these thoughts now? Like, because are you having anxiety, or was it because of a moment that happened in your life? But when you think about it that way, that's just really interesting, Sean.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was a big kind of moment for me in my recovery as well, when I realized that, if I was able to watch a scene in a film and just focus on it, like in that 3 minutes, like effectively the DP and DR was gone. Like it was gone. Now it came back because I kept drifting back to that thought. But in that period of time, like I experienced recovery, however brief, and it changed how I thought about it, because prior to that, how I thought about DPDR was that I had flicked a switch in my brain, and that I must have fried some circuit in my brain, and I now couldn't see things properly, and I couldn't, I was seeing the world differently, and thinking of it in very binary terms. I used to be like this, now I'm like this, and I can't switch it back. And when I started to see these moments and realize that this is variable, this is changing every day, this is changing throughout the day. Like I can like drink a cup of coffee and it'll make my anxiety worse. I can focus on playing a video game for 5 minutes and it'll take my attention away from the anxiety and make it feel better. And I thought, well, if it's this variable, then it's not a switch that was flicked in my head. And if it's not a switch that was flicked in my head, then I can recover from this. All I need to do is like work out these things that are making it better and worse and systematize that. And, a lot of that was based on, researching into cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that. But that major kind of perspective shift of just thinking about it differently. And it's no longer this monolithic thing in your life that's just sitting there and you can't get rid of, but you can change it. You can actually take this onto yourself and fix it. Just going back to a couple of things you mentioned as well, Ryan. It was really interesting the way you were saying about, the way you thought about anxiety and DP at first, in terms of like, I hope I don't have that feeling again. And, I was obsessing over the feelings. And, maybe this time it's not going away. And when you kind of look at the commonality between in those statements, and I can certainly relate to them, but there's very much a kind of there's a feeling of kind of like loss of control in it, of just kind of like you're not, like this is a thing that's happening to you. This is this is something that's outside of your control, and fingers crossed it goes away, and also fingers crossed it does come back. But part of recovery is understanding that this is absolutely within your control. It's always been within your control, and the only reason you felt like it wasn't in the first place was just because of a misunderstanding of what it was. An example I really like to give is, take somebody who experiences claustrophobia, okay? But they've never heard of the term claustrophobia, and they've never heard of the term panic attack before. Maybe they're not even familiar with anxiety outside of, coming up to an exam or something. But somebody with claustrophobia walks into an elevator, and then suddenly they feel like something is wrong, and it's getting worse and worse, and it's not going away, and they're suddenly panicking, and they think they're going to die, or they think they're going to go crazy. Now, without the vernacular and without the knowledge that surrounds and the understanding of that,
right,
for that person, it does feel like they're going crazy. And it feels like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody, and they're going to die. And also their life is over because they can never be in small spaces again. And once you figure out that, once you, even speaking to a therapist who says, no, what you're experiencing is called claustrophobia. It's a common anxiety-based condition. It's completely harmless. It's completely temporary. I know it was a scary experience, but there are ways and means to recover from this and stop it completely. Just having that conversation shifts the camera perspective over from this thing being this, as I said, like a monolithic, dangerous thing that has changed your life, to, oh, this is actually quite a small thing. It was scary going through it, but the reason it was frightening going through it was because I didn't know what was going on. Now I know what's going on, and all of that scaffolding of fear around it is gone, and I can see its anxiety, and I have a plan of attack, and it changes everything. It changes the entire way you think about it. The thing you mentioned as well, Ryan, about like therapists not recognizing or not knowing what DPDR was, I certainly had that too. It's something that I've actually spoken to a DPDR specialist about this, and it's really fascinating. And all it boils down to is the fact that it's so difficult to describe relative to something like claustrophobia. It's a
Right.
it's quite, it's quite a difficult thing to describe accurately, and often people are very afraid to describe it because they worry that, this,
It would
for
trigger.
me, but also, like, but when I remember saying to my doctor, like, I feel like I'm not here,
Oh
like,
yes,
or
that's
yeah,
yes, I know what you
yeah,
mean. That also would cause, worry by others, and you're explaining to someone, and then your worry is that they're going to look at you differently now, and maybe they might, and there's that
yeah,
side of it. But yeah,
yeah,
you would think that, hey, like, people who suffer from anxiety or stress or substance abuse, that therapists would know that, hey, this is a symptom of
mhm,
stress, anxiety, and overthinking. Like, this is a symptom of that. Like, I didn't connect the two at first, right? Like you said, I kind of had that experience of, oh my God, there's something that's flipped. There's a switch that's been flipped in my head, right? So that I had the panic attack. I had for several days a lot of stress after that panic attack, because it was such a scary feeling that I obsessed over it, and I obsessed over, I hope I don't have that again, because that was a really scary feeling.
mhm,
Well, it's like the more you worry about something, the more it's going to have an effect on you, right?
mhm,
The saying goes like, hey, don't think about elephants. Well, you're gonna start thinking about an elephant, right? So don't think about the panic attack. Well, now I'm only thinking about the panic attack, and now I can't seem to get my anxiety levels to come back to normal. And then I started tipping over that waterfall and started dipping into the DP and DR, and then it was like, oh my gosh, this is getting worse. It's not getting any better. This is getting worse. Now I'm having these derealization and depersonalization thoughts. And I started obsessing over, and not to just keep repeating myself, but I started obsessing over those feelings. And my feelings of DP and DR actually weren't very long. Like I said, it was only maybe a few seconds, 5-10 seconds. Um, but the aftermath of having those feelings really just crippled my life, because I was always on edge. I was always having anxious thoughts and feelings that I was just causing for no reason. I mean, not for no reason, because I was having those experiences. But and then again, like I said, I got on the message board and started seeing that, hey, I've had this for 30 years, and that alone, just reading that one little sentence on the message boards, that shook me up. I was like, oh my God, someone's had this for 30 years. I've had this for like 2 weeks, and I'm freaking miserable.
mhm.
So just reading that comment alone scared the crap out of me. And I just obsessed over it and obsessed over it and obsessed over it. And that was that feeling of like, there is now something wrong with me, where like, I'm never going to get over this. I can't stop thinking about it. The first thing I think of when I get up in the morning is, I hope I don't have DP today, which then therefore triggers it, which then therefore causes more anxiety and more stress. It is just constant, just like every single day, the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed, thoughts of DP and anxiety. And for those who have experienced it, know what I'm talking about. It is living hell. And
Mm.
but no, I mean, like, I emailed you, I was like, hey man, your manual literally saved my life, because I could not function. I didn't want to go anywhere. Like you said, like, I didn't want to leave the house. I couldn't even get behind the wheel. I couldn't drive anywhere. I mean, it was terrible. And my wife is just like, I felt so bad. I'm like, Nikki, I need you to drive today. Like, I can't even get behind the wheel. I'm gonna have a panic attack. Like, my anxiety right now is like so bad. From the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, my anxiety was terrible, because I was just worried that, like, this wasn't going to go away. And I was so worried that the DP wasn't going to go away, that it was causing more DP, you know? But
The driving thing was a major thing for me as well. Um, I I
because
was
that's
just
those
terrible.
that's those moments where you kind of like, you slip, usually when you drive, it's kind of like a relaxing thing, and you kind of
Yeah,
have thought, and you have kind of have time to have thoughts to yourself,
right,
right? And
right.
those thoughts to myself were bad.
Are
Showers,
suddenly they're not
showers,
showers. Yeah, yeah.
showers, driving, those
Oh,
types of things where I had time to myself. Terrible.
waiting at the bus stop, waiting
Yes.
in the dentist office. you kind of like, I would think about like my day and think to myself, like, is there going to be a point where like I'm going to have to be on my own with my thoughts for 15 minutes? And I would obsess
Yes.
about that and think how frightening that would be. In terms of the driving thing, I mean, I had this persistent thought that I was going to, like, that the anxiety would get so bad while I was driving that I would lose consciousness, and I would lose consciousness
Swerve
at the
off the road.
wheel. Yeah, and I swerve
Sean,
off the
I'm
road.
this dude. I am the
Oh my
same
God.
way. I literally the exact same thing. I would
Mm.
have to have Nikki drive because literally as I was walking to the car, I would like call her and I'd be like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it home. Like, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to make it home from my destination where I'm at, because I know once I get in that wheel, once I close that door, I start the car and I start driving, it's game on. My anxiety was going through the roof because I couldn't stop thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pass out because I've got so much anxiety because I was worrying about my own thoughts. Same thing in the shower. I'd get in the shower, I would shower as fast as I could just to get out, because like I didn't want to be in those spaces where I had time to think. And those were the
Yeah,
times where I would literally, my heart would start racing. I would almost have another panic attack, right?
mm.
Um, that's
it's
so
it, it-
interesting.
it's
So relatable.
it's so, yeah, and and it's, as I was saying to you before, I was saying to you earlier, the commonalities in people's experiences are so, um
This
they're
universal.
fascinating. They're so
Yeah.
fascinating. It's there's so much about this experience is universal. Um, but yeah, like your day turns into this constant kind of monitoring of what's coming up, and will I be able to manage this when it comes up? And then you're not able to just enjoy the times when you want to kind of sit down and relax, and you try try to sit down and read a book or watch a film, and for me, I was just thinking ahead into the next day, and like, what if the DP levels are worse tomorrow? How am I going to manage that? And it just becomes your focus. It becomes
So
your entire focus.
yeah, my early stages of self-diagnosis was when I'm busy doing things, I don't have DP. So my
Mm,
initial thought was, I got to stay busy. I got to
mm,
have something to do all day long. I got to make sure I have a schedule. I got to be here. I got to do this, and this. I got to get all these chores done, because if I have something else to focus on, I won't have DP. But that wasn't really solving the issue, right? I would
mm,
always revert back to the DP and the anxiety because I wasn't really curing, that I really wasn't, I didn't have an understanding of what was going on. And so me trying to trick myself, and you know what? I'm going to shower as fast as I can to get out of the shower. And I need to have things to do. I need to have a full schedule so that I stay busy, so that I don't have time to think. I don't have time to think about, hey, am I having anxiety right now? I just have something I need to get done. And
mm,
so that was my first initial self-diagnosis, was like, okay, there was a time earlier when I didn't have DP. Well, that's because I was playing golf, or I was running or exercising. I wasn't thinking about it.
mm,
So that's the idea. That's the trick. I'll just stay busy. But that didn't work, right? Because I didn't really understand what was happening and why those feelings of DP were getting triggered. Because as soon as I completed all my tasks, and as soon as I finished all of my work for the day, the first thing I would do was, okay, how do I feel now?
mm.
Boom. And it was like starting from square one.
Yeah, and absolutely. Because if you think that you're just kind of doing this trial and error thing,
Yep.
and hoping that this goes away, but also in the context of not really understanding it, and also having spoken to, as you mentioned earlier, Ryan, like speaking to a therapist who doesn't know the terms, then you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm completely at the mercy of this, like I can do stuff that makes me feel better temporarily, but this can always come back. Or for me, it was like, what if I recover? If I can get rid of this, great. But like, what happens if like 6 months down the road, I have another panic attack and I'm just back to square one? Um, and that terrified me. But again, it's all this kind of misunderstanding that anxiety is something that you are at the mercy of, and that it is outside of your control. And so much of the recovery process is changing that point of view and understanding and internalizing that this is not outside of your control. It's always been in your control. And just that kind of takes away it reduces the monitoring of it, and it reduces the kind of catastrophizing into the future about, like, what happens if this,
You're
what
taking
happens if
power
this comes
away.
back, and
Yeah.
you're taking the power back for
Yes.
yourself, and you're slowly but surely understanding that everything that you went through, including like when it first happened and you literally thought you were losing your mind, that all of that was anxiety, and it was misinterpreting your body and brain's fight or flight response. And it's so liberating when you get to that place. And it's also very calming, because I mean, for me, at one point, Ryan, like I actually remember saying to myself, like, I didn't think it was possible to be as afraid as I was. I felt like I was in a horror film. I felt like I was stuck in a horror film, and it was just like as you said, it just felt like you're in hell, like, and you can't.
Yeah.
There is no escape from your own thoughts.
Yeah.
At one point, I was having nightmares about it, so it was even happening in my sleep, and just the loss of control and the kind of loss of everything that kind of you felt you had to look forward to in your life now became things to be afraid of, was horrendous. But as bad as all that is or was, the recovery process changes your perspective on it and actually just makes sense. And you say, oh, that's why I felt like that. That's why I felt like that. One thing I wanted to ask as well, Ryan, you may have mentioned it already, but if you don't mind me asking, what was your lowest point in the whole experience? Is there something specific you can remember?
I don't know if there was a lowest moment, and I don't know if I had like I don't know if I was ever in that moment where I was sitting in bed or I had a thought to myself, or like, this is it, like my life is over. I always like had I always like wanted to continue to get better. Like I had those thoughts of like, I want to get better. I want to get over this. I want to just move on with my life, but I can't, you know. Um, but really just kind of those day-to-day just struggles that like everyone goes with. Like I couldn't get behind the wheel of a car. I mean, I drove for 15 years, and all of a sudden I can't even get inside of a car without feeling anxious. Like I've took a shower every day of my life for 32 years, and now I can't even get in a freaking shower without like wanting to rush to get the hell out of there. um I couldn't go down in the basement and be alone anymore. I would be like, Nikki, I don't want to be alone. Like, I don't want to be alone anymore. Like, I couldn't. I'm like, hey, can you come in here while I shower? Or like, hey, can you ride with me? Like I couldn't do things by myself. And I think one of the things that really hurt me the most was, um, I thought to myself, and she didn't feel this way, but I felt this way. I was like, I'm really putting a lot of this stress on my family. I'm making her life more difficult. Um, maybe my wife is going to look at me differently now. So I had those all kind, I have an 8-month-old, so she doesn't know, but, but, uh, but yeah, that was really a tough moment for me when I was thinking to myself, like, I'm now dependent on my wife. I'm dependent on others. I cannot be alone. Otherwise, I catastrophize literally everything, every single thought. I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, no one's here. What if I have a panic attack? What if I start to freak out? And honestly, I haven't mentioned this, um, but I thought to myself, like, I have to have some sort of alcohol near me at all times, because if I really start freaking out and I have a panic attack, I have to have a drink to calm down. And there were a couple moments where like my anxiety was so high, right? My anxiety levels were like, I just feel terrible. I feel miserable. Um, I'm so anxious right now. I can't even be on this vacation that I'm on. And so I would start to drink. I would have a few beers and I'd be like, okay, I can at least relax a little bit now. Like I feel normal, right? After having a few drinks. And so that, if you want to talk about what was the lowest moment, I think like, okay, we're really having issues now that like I'm having so much anxiety and so much worry about this DP that I'm having to drink now to just get rid of my anxious feelings because alcohol makes me at least feel like loose. It makes me feel okay. I can at least get my stress levels to go down. The DP and DR are still there, but at least I can get my stress levels down. So that was not a good situation to be in. So hopefully that kind of answers the question, you know.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting. Something I hadn't kind of considered in a while, but the the fact of like being an adult and becoming dependent on people again. So I mean, I moved back to my, and I was 25, but I moved back to my parents' place, and I was basically relying on them for everything because I wasn't able to function, I wasn't able to work, and how demoralizing that feels, and just how kind of sad it feels to be kind of in the, you know, you feel like you're in the prime of life, and but no, that's stopped, and you have to go and do this, and you need to have people take care of you because you're unable,
Friends would
you
yeah.
can't even get in a car, you can't
I
you,
had
you
friends
can't you
that
can't
wanted to
shower
do
without having a panic attack.
no,
Sorry,
I
go ahead.
mean, yeah, and I had and just having a conversation. I mean, I had friends that were inviting me to go do things. Hey Ryan, we're going out to dinner tonight, man. You want to come? I had to come up with stupid excuses like, oh man, I got a newborn, man. Man, I got to stay home. Got, new dad life kind of thing. That really wasn't the reason, you know? And so I had to come up with lies and stuff to tell people like, I work from home. And sometimes part of my job is going out and actually seeing customers. And so, fortunately I work for my family. And so I had to tell my father-in-law, I'm like, hey man, like I can't make it to this appointment today because of XYZ. And I'd have to come up with some excuse. But in the reality was that like, I didn't want to go and be in front of a stranger because I just had this fear of like, oh my God, what if I have a panic attack? What if I have anxiety? What if I have DP when I'm in the meeting? Like, it literally stopped my whole world. It literally did. But like you said, I couldn't get behind the wheel. I couldn't be around strangers. I only wanted to be around my wife or my parents, the people who actually knew that I was going through this symptom, this condition. So yeah, it can have a big effect. It affects everyone differently, but it's amazing, you know, like you said, 32 years old, just, one of the things that I really struggled with was like, I just had a newborn baby girl. This should be the most exciting time of my life. This should be the best moment of my life. And here I am, crippled with anxiety and stress and panic and DP. And that was like a really low moment.
Absolutely. And the worry that for me as well, it was thinking, I would imagine things in the future. I'd imagine, okay, so what's my what's my 30th birthday going to look like? Am I going to want to be there? Am I going to, you know, what happens if like if my little sister gets married? Am I at that wedding? Am I just going to be completely disconnected from what's going on? Am I going to be able to function as a human being? Just this like wild catastrophizing off into the future. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and it's so profoundly difficult to describe to the people around you as well. And also you feel like you don't want to worry them, because it's scary enough saying to the doctor something like, I feel like I'm not here. I feel like there's a pane of glass between me and reality. But if you're saying that to your parents or your siblings, or your loved one, you're obviously, you know, you don't want to scare them, but it's a scary thing to talk about. But again, fortunately, the awareness of it and understanding that this is just another anxiety-based condition, just like claustrophobia or agoraphobia, takes that aspect of or takes that scaffolding of fear away from it, and allows us to talk about it realistically, and to give it the the space that it deserves in your life, which is much smaller than the space that we were used to giving it.
Right. We're taking the life away. We're taking the power away. We're taking the life away from that condition that, as we talked about, it was my life. This condition was my life. Anxiety was my life. And now taking that power away from something that should only be there in moments that I need it, only in moments that I'm truly in danger, or I truly have something to worry about. I shouldn't be having to worry about sitting in a room by myself, or sitting in a car, taking a shower. So, taking that power away from something that that shouldn't have power over our lives, is a really good feeling to have. So
Yeah, absolutely. Anxiety requires our attention in order to exist. So, our attention is anxiety's oxygen. And when it happens first and we don't understand why it's happening, because we're not, getting chased by a wild animal, there's no danger happening, but we feel this anxiety, and it feels like the most it feels
important
like it
thing.
makes the most important thing, and it feels like it makes so much sense to take all of your attention and look at this and go,
Yes.
I will stop everything in my life to fix this, and everything else has to wait, and I'll move home with my parents, and I'll stop working, and I'll stop driving, and I'll stop showering, and everything stops until you fix this.
To get this figured out.
Yeah. And it's only in retrospect that we kind of look at that experience and we say, okay, that, and like we can't blame ourselves for taking that approach, because that, why wouldn't you at first? But part of recovery from any anxiety-based condition is saying that even though it feels counterintuitive to do it, we need to actively take our attention like a spotlight and focus away from the anxiety, because it's been the attention and the spotlight that's been allowing it to persist, combined with the misunderstanding of what it was. On a brighter note, Ryan, can you describe how it felt to come out of it, and how it felt to kind of get back to your normal day-to-day life, and how has that been for you?
Well, I think again, I started reading the manual. I was in bed at night. I started reading this manual. Things started clicking. And I think again, not everyone's story is the same. Not everyone suffers from DP or anxiety from a panic attack. It could be something totally different. It could be from whatever. But man, as I was sitting there reading the manual, it was just punching me right. And I was like, dude, this guy gets it, man. I was sitting there looking at Nikki. I was like, this is it. This guy gets it right here, right? So I felt like I could attack this thing head on, and that I didn't have to give it the power that it deserved anymore. So there were still moments where, like I kind of mentioned, that I would still think about it, like, man, remember yesterday when you had DP? Or remember that feeling when you were walking down that hallway to go to your hotel room and you had that disconnection? Well, I didn't have that today. I didn't have that feeling of disconnection today. Or if I felt myself going there, I would tell myself, no need to worry. I'm feeling a little anxious right now. That's maybe why I'm having those symptoms, right? And so, it was just that every day just kind of got better and better and better. And I just took away more and more power than this condition deserved. And I think just the understanding of what it was allowed me to practice, in real life, just just getting back to normalcy. But, in my steps of recovery, the first thing I did was I downloaded your audiobooks. I did exactly what you told me to do. I was listening to them before I go to bed at night. And I just kind of stopped thinking about it, right? I think you mentioned, like, in some of your YouTube videos, you're like, okay, you're probably watching this YouTube video because, you're having anxiety or having DP. Well, here's the real simple truth. Stop researching it, right? Stop looking more into it. Stop giving it more life than it deserves. And so I try to just take that approach. But I really think the understanding of like, you know, well, I wasn't having any symptoms before I had this panic attack. And so therefore, you know, that makes sense to me that I'm having all this stress and anxiety and why I'm having DP. Well, I don't need to have stress. We're just hanging out in Florida. We're just doing things, going out to lunch, hanging out by the pool. I don't need to have anxiety right now. And so I just kind of like started to take back those things that I was hiding from and started enjoying those things more again without that feeling of like I needed to be afraid of it. You know, like I felt like I needed to be afraid to take a shower. I felt like I needed to be afraid because I was trying to tackle that anxiety. Like you said, like, hey, when you have anxiety, your brain wants to fix it, like you said. And so I just felt like there was nothing more there to fix. So that's kind of like what again helped me at the earliest stages of my recovery. But I don't know. It's not like there was a moment, Sean, where it was like I'm completely healed. It was just kind of like putting those bullet points into practice. And I would feel myself going there, and then I would kind of take power away from those feelings by, oh, like I'm a little stressed out right now because I don't know, the baby's crying, or I've got a deadline or something, and I'm starting to feel myself go there. Well, it's okay. I'm having stress and anxiety because the baby's crying, or I've got a lot to do today. Not because I need to worry about being worried, or not because I need to worry about having DP. Um, I'm just a little anxious right now because I'm supposed to be anxious right now. So I, I don't know. I just have to say that just that feeling of relief after getting through those audiobooks and getting through that manual, literally, as I was reading it, I could literally feel the weight being lifted off of my shoulders, that I didn't have to be afraid of this condition anymore. And I think just like I don't have to be afraid anymore. Like I said, I told you, it was like almost overnight. The next day I woke up and felt like a whole new person almost. So I don't know. It's that crazy, right? It doesn't have to slowly happen over time because there's nothing wrong with you, right? And I think that's why it felt like such a instant relief as I was getting through that book and those audiobooks, because there was nothing wrong there in the beginning. So it's not like, hey, we got to battle this thing every single day, and we're gonna, like, when you have an injury, you rehab, right? You rehab, you get your strength back or whatever, and you can play again. Well, in this scenario, there was never really an injury. There was never really anything physically wrong with you other than the emotional response that you were having to these thoughts. And so it was a very fast thing. Like literally, it really happened really quickly, Sean. And I wish I had a better explanation of like, yeah, there was like 2 or 3 weeks there where, I was going through this, and no, I really didn't have any of that. It was really more of like an overnight switch to where I realized like, I don't have to be afraid of this anymore. And it was really ruining my life for months and months and months and months, every single day. And then the next day I woke up, because like I said, I was reading that manual like late at night. So I went to sleep. I woke up and I was like, I don't have to worry about this anymore because I know what it is, you know?
That is great. That's fantastic to hear. Yeah, no, I'm delighted. People have different recovery times. It's fantastic to hear that that your recovery was so quick. But yeah, so what's your day-to-day life like at the moment?
Well, still being a dad, so still, managing, taking a little one in the mornings, getting her changed, getting her fed, knocking out my emails for work, and then just enjoying being with my family, right? So getting to do the things I once loved to do. I can get in the car by myself now, go to the gym every day, at lunchtime, drive home by myself, take a shower by myself, um, be alone by myself. Uh, just doing the things, go meet friends out for drinks, go meet friends for golf, or, go meet my in-laws out for dinner with my family. Just day-to-day activities that I was associating with anxiety and stress, and I literally was like avoiding them like the plague. And now I can just do them again because I want to. But before, I literally was avoiding all social interaction. Like, Nikki, hey, you have to go inside and order. I can't go inside and order and look at the person in front of me at Chick-fil-A. I can't even have a conversation with anybody because I'm so anxious and worried. Now I just go in and place my order, you know? So that's what I'm doing now, Sean. I'm just doing kind of, what the average 32-year-old would be doing, right? Raising a family, working, just trying to make it in this world. But it feels really good not having that weight of stress and anxiety and DP weighing on my shoulders anymore. And looking back, and there was kind of a moment there when we were talking maybe 20-30 minutes ago, but looking back, I mean, you were like, on a more positive note, man, it really is a difficult thing. And it really was a traumatic experience when I was going through, that condition, man. And it can really, really have an effect on your life. But you can recover. For those listening, you can recover. Don't listen to those message boards like I did, like you did. Man, they'll mess you up. They will mess you up more. I got on that internet and I started researching this stuff and I started reading people. I've had depersonalization since I was 25 and I'm now 52. And I'm like, holy crap. Like,
Yeah.
I'm never going to get over this.
Mm.
But you can. And thank you, Sean, for the wonderful work that you've done. And your YouTube channel was a great start to how I kind of got into the manual. Is like, this guy gets it, right? Because some of the other videos that I watched on YouTube, I don't know, they were okay, but they just weren't really cutting to like the thick of like what this condition was, why you were having these thoughts, why you were disassociating, and then you were so confident, like, you can recover, you will get past this. Other videos I watched are like, just keep at it, just keep working. No, you did a really good job, Sean. And that's when I was like, I got to buy this guy's manual. And that's when I got it. And it was just game over, man. As I read, literally, I was like, he had a panic attack. I had a panic attack. He was on those message boards. I was on those message boards. He was literally hiding away at his parents' house. I was at my in-laws' house hiding from everyone, working from home, So thank you, Sean, again, for putting the work in to do that manual, because, I'm sure I'm one of many success stories, but for those who may be living this right now, or someone who may be experiencing these symptoms right now, hopefully they'll be listening to my recovery story and can possibly relate to some of the things I went through. But you can take you can take power away from this condition, because there was nothing wrong with you before you had this condition, and there's nothing wrong with you now. You're giving power to something that you don't need to give power to, and you can get past it.
Fantastic. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I am delighted that you're recovered, and that my book was helpful on the way. So listen, enjoy being a dad, and enjoy the post NFL life.
Thank you.
Listen, mind yourself, take care, and if you're ever over in Ireland, give me a shout and we'll go for a pint, okay?
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much for having me again, Sean. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Ryan. Take care, man.
Thank you.